Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish video. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish video, I'll be overviewing the Early Adventures Series 5. Yes, the Early Adventures, much like the Companion Chronicles, is a range what sort of goes under the radar. And you know, that's understandable because obviously William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee are sadly no longer with us. So obviously I can see why people kind of skip these releases and they just sort of, you know, go under the radar. But I think once you discover the Companion Chronicles and the Early Adventures, you'll just be in awe, because I feel like it is a hidden gold mine of stories, and it's just very much the hidden gem on Big Finish's crown, because they have so many wonderful stories. The Early Adventures, like the Sontarans, the Revelli Conspiracy, Domain of the Void, the Yes Men, the Night Witches, the Outliers. There are so many wonderful stories within the Early Adventures. I thought it'd be quite nice to do another overview and giving the Early Adventures some love and appreciation, because by gum, they're wonderful stories. So I have overviewed Series 4, I'll leave a link in the description below to that video, which is a second Doctor series. But Series 5 does something a little bit different, because this being a first Doctor series, we normally have the wide variety of companions. So we might have a release with Ian, Barbara and Susan, the next we might have Ian, Barbara and Vicky, then Stephen and Vicky, then we might have Stephen and Sarah Kingdom. So you're basically getting a mini-series with the Doctor, Vicky and Stephen. But this series does something a little bit different, because obviously the Early Adventures are, you know, relatively standalone. This series, it does sort of all continually flow into each other. If you're familiar with the William Hartnell era, you'll know exactly what I mean. But a new series equivalent is basically like Smile and Thin Ice, where the adventures would sort of overlap into one and follow on into each other. You can cherry pick these releases. If you want to just pick up a random one, then you can do that, but I would say Entanglement and the Crash of UK 210 are the stories what I think personally link into each other the most. The rest are very relatively standalone, you don't need any context, but I feel like Entanglement and Crash of UK 210 are the stories what, in my personal opinion, overlap. And I think that this series, you know, though it all flows into one and it does sort of have an arc, it's nothing as grand and as epic as what you'll see in the 8th Doctor range, or the 4th Doctor Series 8, for example. It's more of a character-driven series, focusing on how each character within this TARDIS team ticks, and the stories really do sort of put strain on that TARDIS team. The 4 stories, obviously, I need to mention that obviously the Dalek Occupation of Winter, in my personal opinion, is very much of a Doctor's story. Then we have an Ideal World, which in my eyes, I think that's Stephen's story. Then Entanglement, the 3rd story, is very much sort of them all together, sort of mucking about really. And then the 4th story is all about Vicky. So I feel like each character has their own moment to shine and has their own stories dedicated to them. So it's very much a character-driven series. And like I said, you can listen to these stories in any order, but I feel like Entanglement and Crash of UK 210 is the ones what sort of really do sort of flow into each other the most. The rest you probably can get away with listening to them without that sort of context of the previous story. So the way this video is going to work is I'm going to go from my least favourite story to my favourite. Simple. So there's only 4 stories, so it shouldn't take too long unless I blabber on, which is probably likely. So I best go into my opening thoughts on Series 5 of the Early Adventures. Well, I say this in quite a lot of my Big Finish videos now, actually. But, you know, it's incredibly consistent, and I feel like this series is probably the most consistent Early Adventure series I've experienced, and probably is my favourite Early Adventure series. I feel like with any Big Finish range or any series you watch or listen to, there's normally that one dud story. What you think, yeah, that didn't quite do for me, that was the weak link within the series. Series 5, in my personal opinion, I love all the stories within it. I think all 4 stories bring something completely different to the table. You have 3 very traditional 1960s Doctor Who stories, then the 4th story being sort of an unconventional 60s story, but still has the flourish and the magic of 60s Doctor Who thrown in. So it's an interesting bunch of stories. Taking the 4th place in this overview, we have the 3rd story, Entanglement, by Robert Carlin and Tom Solinsky. Now, this story was my most anticipated from the series, because Robert Carlin and Tom Solinsky wrote one of my favourite early adventures, the Revelli Conspiracy, which is a wonderful early adventure. I highly recommend that story because it's just brilliant. So I had high expectations for this, and if you're familiar with a story called The Daemons, that, you know, that prolific John Pertwee story, there's a line about an incident happening in Cambridge in the 1930s, and this story is set in Cambridge in the 1930s, in 1938, on the cusp of the Second World War, and there's a few little bits where the Doctor kind of foreshadows the Second World War, which is very interesting. Now this story is very much of a comedy story within this series. It's very much of a light, fluffy story to a degree, because the other stories kind of have a bit more dark, a bit more darkness, a bit more sort of bleakness to them. You know, nothing dark and twisted like the War Master, but kind of the 60s equivalent of dark, really. But yeah, this is the kind of the light-hearted story of the series. Now, the story itself is basically a mystery story. What happened to this missing provost, a professor, and why is there sort of advanced technology what shouldn't be there, and why are the students becoming restless? Why are they sort of fighting, you know, and why are best friends turning on each other and fighting each other, which is quite interesting. And the story itself, when I was gathering my thoughts thinking, okay, what do I think of this story, I was thinking back going, really not much happens within this story. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because when I was listening to it, I wasn't bored. I feel like the mystery really keeps you going, keeps you intrigued. But when I was looking back, and I thought, really not much happens. You know, one episode is basically the Doctor's TARDIS is stuck on a wall, you know, stuck on this sort of ledge, and they're trying to get the TARDIS down. That's basically the story in a way, and them trying to uncover the mystery. So yeah, not much happens within the story, but that's not a negative, because I feel like the character interactions really make it quite a strong thing, because obviously there's animosity between Stephen and Vicky, because obviously this, you know, people are turning on each other, and that's kind of a bit of a theme within this series, because this series, like I said, this series really just puts strain on the TARDIS team. The story also features two very young secret agents from the Cold War, which is Kim and Guy, and I will say that the individual titles for this story really do sum up the theme of the episodes for that certain part. So episode 1 is the Wall of Death, so the TARDIS being stuck on the wall. Then we have Photographic Evidence, which is basically them sort of uncovering the mystery. Then episode 3 is the Hour of Voting, when they're voting for a new provost, which ties into the alien subplot. Then we have the Entanglement Machine, which is focusing on the Entanglement Machine, if you couldn't guess already. Now, there is a great little moment in part 1, I think, when the First Doctor has to do a lecture, and that's quite funny, seeing the First Doctor do that. But yeah, it's quite interesting. We do have a little reference to Professor Chronotis from Sharda, which is quite nice for Doctor saying, I really must visit him. But yeah, the alien threat I really like. I think that this is one of the most ideas what I really did enjoy about this story, because obviously teachers and professors and tutors are kind of extravagant and eccentric characters. They're going to blend in perfectly in, you know, the aliens are going to blend in perfectly into this environment, because, you know, the odd isn't questioned within these, you know, this place full of eccentric people. So the aliens can just, you know, blend in really well. So I really like that idea. The Entanglement Machine, really interesting idea. That was a very nice idea. And the ending I blew in love. I thought the ending was fantastic, and it leads into the Crash of UK 210 brilliantly, because you're really wanting to go, right, I need to listen to the next story right now, because the ending for the story is brilliant. But yeah, this isn't a bad story by any means. I just feel like it's more of a simple, laid-back story, and I feel like the others offer something a little bit more. This isn't a bad story. I just feel like the other 3 stories just offer something a little bit extra. So yeah, I'm going to give this story a 7.5 out of 10. Very good story. But yeah, very nice story, but doesn't really have much more. So at number 3 we have An Ideal World, the second story within this series. Now this story, I think the best way to describe it is a Hartnell equivalent of a Hinchcliffe story. It very much has that Philip Hinchcliffe feel to it, to a degree, but with the 60s magic and charm. Now part 1 is incredibly atmospheric, and yeah, I just think the strongest thing for me about a story is the world building. The world building, what Ian Potter does, is fantastic, and this is the story, out of all 4, I can see this one being on television. I can see them turning Ealing Studio into a jungle. I can see them really working, much like Kemble or The Ark. I can just really picture this story on my head. Now this story is incredibly chunky. Now this story could be considered a 6-parter, because I think episode 1's about 36 minutes and episode 2's 38 minutes. It's a real chunky story, so yeah, this could be a 6-part story, if they really wanted to make it a 6-parter. Now the themes within this story, I feel like this is another thing that I really did enjoy about this story, is the themes within it, the moral and ethics, because you have 2 human fractions kind of arguing about how to colonise this planet. So it's very interesting because they both have very different methods of doing it. And by the end of it, you know, this story does kind of have a bit of a dark, twisted ending. Part 4 does take a bit of a dark turn with, you know, what happens to certain characters. And, you know, at the end of the story, we see, you know, the companions going, Doctor, look, we need to stay and help. You know, we can't just leave this character to help and rebuild. You know, she might have done something wrong, but, you know, we need to help. And the Doctor's like, no. Maybe a time I would have agreed with her methods, but I've changed. I think that it's quite nice to see the first Doctor have a bit of character progression, to see him become more of that magical figure, what we all know and love, not this harsh, cold character, because he's very much like the companions. Maybe at a time I would have agreed with that person's actions, but I've changed now, and that person can, you know, live with the consequences and deal with her actions. So I think that's a really nice idea. So I thought that was really nice. I thought it was quite a nice way of doing it. The first Doctor is a little bit out of this story. He's very much sort of in and out within this story because he has a virus, a bit of an illness from the planet. And there's a really nice, sweet moment when he's starting to lose consciousness, and he's, you know, going, you know, writing down on this piece of paper, you know, telling Vicky what to do. And it's just a really nice, sweet moment. And there's some really great moments between the first Doctor and Vicky within this story, which I really do like. And Stephen, you know, probably gets the most to do within this story because he's very much trying to find a cure for the Doctor, which is very interesting. The alien threat within the story, I think it's good, but I do feel like it is a bit of an afterthought. I feel like Ian Potter had this story all laid out, and then he's like, oh, I need a bit of an alien within it, because, yeah, this story is a very much a hard sci-fi story, but I don't feel like it needs the alien threat to a degree. I feel like there's enough going on within this story, because there's just a lot of themes and topics that are quite meaty to, you know, really discuss and develop and discuss further within this story. The alien kind of does seem like a bit of an afterthought, so that's kind of my negative within this story. But I think that it is a brilliant story, and it is a story I can easily imagine being done on television. And I think there's some really nice, beautiful character moments, and the ending is brilliant, because like, it's really nice to see the you know, I think that it's really nice to see the companions stand up to the Doctor and go, look, why aren't you doing this? And it's quite nice to see that the first Doctor have that bit of character progression, which is very nice. So I'm going to give An Ideal World an 8 out of 10. Very strong story, and yeah, 8 out of 10. On to number 2. Now this story is going to cause a little bit of scratching of heads, going, well, Big Finish people really did adore this one. This is a story what was highly praised across the board, and it is The Dalek Occupation of Winter. What, a Dalek story second? Why is it not number 1? Well, I just prefer the other story what's at number 1, which we'll get on to in a minute. So let's talk about The Dalek Occupation of Winter. Now this is the Daleks' debut within the early adventures. So yeah, it's taken them 5 series, and here they are. And I think they might be in series 6 with a second Doctor. I don't know, but that's a thing what was on Twitter. So The Dalek Occupation of Winter, like I said, this story was highly praised across the Doctor Who Big Finish board. It was a story everyone seemed to love, and rightly so, because it is a very good story. And it does try and do something different with the Daleks, which, you know, it's quite difficult to do something new with the Daleks, because just think of how many Dalek stories there are. So this story does do something a little bit different. Now the story does remind me very much of Power of the Daleks, The Elite and the Crotons. It's kind of a merge of those stories. And episode 1 does kind of remind me of the Macra Terror, with the sort of jolliness of it in a way, but obviously things are not very well on this planet. So yeah, the Daleks from this story are wonderful. I feel like the way the Daleks are introduced and the way the Daleks are sold to you as the listener is fantastic, because the way the Doctor, Vicky and Stephen react to the Daleks, it really does heighten the fear factor, because the Daleks on this planet have done no wrong. You know, this isn't your traditional, you know, the Daleks have this colony, you know, enslaved, you know, they're working at endless hours, you know, and people are dying and they just kill them if you're not working. This is something far different to that. You know, this is not your traditional Dalek story in that sense. You know, the Daleks are loved. Everybody loves the Daleks within this story. And obviously it's the Doctor, Vicky and Stephen's job to try and persuade people. And I feel like Stephen gets some great moments to do within this when he's in the factory. And he's trying to, you know, persuade this person, look, the Daleks are evil. And obviously, you know, the Dalek, you know, its guns twitching, it wants to exterminate, but it seems like you can't, because it will ruin your reputation. And it's just such a wonderful moment, because Stephen gets some really powerful moments. But like I said, the Doctor wonderful within this story. I feel like this is classic Hartnell, because like I said in my top 10 Big Finish releases of 2018, you know, there's a moment when he's being interrogated and this woman has the Dalek pyroflame, and you can just imagine the First Doctor just clutching the lapels going, come on then, I'm telling you the truth, I'm here to help. And I just absolutely love that, going, look, the Daleks are evil, you must listen to me, you ship. I just think that's absolutely wonderful. I can just really picture that scene within it. Vicky does have some very interesting moments, but I feel like the big twist within this story, I kind of wanted them to do something a little bit different. I'm kind of expecting, because the Daleks are taking these, you know, these students who are the most intelligent to become scientists and work for the colony and to develop the colony's technology, which is a very interesting idea. But I kind of expected them to sort of, the Daleks to be mutating these humans into Dalek mutants. It doesn't do that. I'm not going to reveal the twist, but there are some nice little twists within this story. And it's quite interesting to see the Daleks sort of looking after this colony. You know, they provide the food. So this colony is very much dependent on the Daleks. You know, they depend on them for work, you know, employment and everything. The colony leader within this is very much like Marvick Chen. He's very much a person who belittles the Daleks, but he does get his comeuppance within this story. And this story does have a bit of a bleak feel to it, because this world is sort of winter lasts 300 years on this planet. So it does have a sort of cold, harsh environment, which just suits the Daleks incredibly well. The ending, I just absolutely love. The ending is really heartbreaking in a way, because you feel like the Doctor, Vic and Stephen feel like they've done good, but they've saved this colony planet. But little did they know, nothing has changed. Nothing on this planet has changed at all. It's still going to be the same. You know, I think that that's a really quite heartbreaking, that they feel like they've put an end to the Daleks on this colony, they've put an end to their regime, but little did they know that literally nothing's changed, and that's quite heartbreaking, isn't it, when they feel like they've done good in the universe, but really they haven't made a difference. And I think that's really quite a powerful statement. I feel like Dalek Occupation of Winter and An Ideal World have some of the bleakest endings to, you know, a Big Finish I've experienced. So yeah, Dalek Occupation Winter, very good story, definitely recommend this one. Because it does have some very interesting ideas, and again, it's a very chunky story. You know, this story could be a 6-part if it wanted to, because the parts are about, what, 36 minutes long, and I believe part 1 is free on the Big Finish website. You can download it for free, so check it out if you like what you hear, and obviously buy the full story. But yeah, very good story, very interesting ideas, and it's quite nice to see them try and do something a little bit different with the Daleks, and I really did enjoy the characters' interaction with the Daleks, because obviously they know the Daleks are evil. And I think that the Daleks are fantastic within it, because they're very sly and devious and obviously manipulating this colony, and they've got them round their little plunger. And I think that's really wonderful to see the Daleks really have that sense of power within it. So yeah, really did enjoy this story, so I'm going to give the Dalek Occupation of Winter a 9 out of 10. At number 1, I can't really build it up because there's only 4 stories, and it is The Crash of UK 210. Now, if you asked me about 2 hours ago, I would have said my favourite story was The Dalek Occupation of Winter. But I feel like this story needs to be put at number 1. I just really did enjoy the themes within this story, because this is by Jonathan Morris, who is a writer which is well regarded within the Doctor Who community, and I feel like Jonathan Morris really hasn't done much with Big Finish over the past couple of years, and the stuff what he's done I haven't really enjoyed that much, I'll be honest. Like the Time War 2 story, what he did, didn't really enjoy that one. But this, I feel like this is classic Jonathan Morris. This is wonderful. If you're a fan of Vicky, you're going to want to get this one, because it is wonderful. Because this story is very much Vicky's equivalent of the Aztecs, because we see Vicky changing her own history, and obviously this follows on from Entanglement. Now we see her go back on the ship what she was on the rescue, before it crashed onto the planet Dido. But this, we don't see the spaceship crash on the planet Dido, because things have changed, and this is very much exploring the butterfly effect. This is very much a character piece story for Vicky, but it has a very interesting sci-fi concept around it. So at the heart of the story, it's all about Vicky, but you know, round that we have a fantastic story dealing with the consequences of altering personal history. Now we see Stephen tagging along with Vicky, but we have Stephen jumping time tracks at the beginning of the story because he's not meant to be there, and obviously because Vicky has altered her own history, means she has never met the Doctor. So that causes a bit of dilemma for Stephen, because obviously Vicky's the person who made, them go on the planet Mechanus. It does explore Stephen to a tiny bit. We do have a bit of a scene where Stephen's about to jump from the White City where the mechanoids are, so yeah, that's quite interesting. But this is a Doctor-like story. The Doctor doesn't come into the story until sort of midway through episode 3. But he does appear in the sort of first 2 episodes as a bit of a ghost, that he's trying to communicate with the 2 companions, but you just can't hear him. So I think that's quite interesting. We have a very interesting sort of monster in the form of these time parasites, which I don't know if you can see, are these kind of hooded figures, and they're kind of like the Reapers in a way. So this story we basically see Vicky live an ordinary life, to quote another early adventure, on the planet Astra, where she was meant to end up. So throughout this story we see Vicky changing small little things, so things, bad things don't happen. She's seen what happens to her family, and she's trying to change certain events so the outcome doesn't happen. But obviously there are consequences to that, which is obviously these time parasites things that I mentioned earlier. And it's quite a heartbreaking story, because she has to keep on reliving family members' death, her own father's death, her husband, her daughter's death, and it's very interesting to see. It's quite an emotional story just to see that the character just has to keep on reliving that pain of grief again, which is very interesting within it. And I just think that it is a really beautiful story, and I just love the butterfly effect being explored. I really love the sort of time element of it. If you just change one tiny detail or say something just slightly different, you'll have a completely different outcome, and I think that this story really does explore that brilliantly. And obviously it's just a wonderful story, and I think that it's one of those stories where no matter what I say about the story, it won't do it justice. I feel like it's a story what you just have to go and listen to and experience. And I find it quite funny that when Vicky doesn't travel with the Doctor, she novelises her adventures with the Doctor, because she can still remember them. So we have like Vicky and the Crusaders and Vicky and the Zarbi, and if you're familiar with the Target book titles, then that might be a bit funny, because you might be going, oh, Jonathan Morris, you did a funny there. So yeah, that's quite a nice little touch, really. But yeah, it's a really quite a heartbreaking story to see Vicky trying to save everyone she loves, but she just can't, because of just the way time works and just changing the small details. It's really quite a story what explores paradoxes as well, so I think that there's quite a lot going on within the story, but still never loses sight of the character piece what this story is. And I really did enjoy that, because the story really does explore Vicky's father, it explores the ship that she was on before it crashed on the planet Dido. So it is very much a what if with the rescue, and if you're familiar with Vicky's stories, you'll get a kick out of this, because it does sort of reference quite a few of them, and it does show how reliant Stephen is of Vicky, because obviously Vicky is the person who got Stephen aboard the TARDIS, which is quite an interesting thought. And like I said, the Doctor brilliant within it, and I feel like the ending is really sweet. It's just a really nice, heartwarming ending to this story, because this story does put you through an emotional ringer, and it is quite a bleak and dark story, especially for Vicky, sort of reliving that grief and that pain, like I said earlier. So yeah, Crash of UK 210, fantastic, very interesting monster within it, and like I said, this story is the unconventional 60s story, but it still has that magical flair what the 60s has, especially on the planet Astra. You can really imagine, these, the way the 60s imagine the future. We've got some really nice, creepy, unsettling moments. The music reminds me very much of the Cyberman series. It does have that kind of music what features in the first series of the Cyberman series. So yeah, a very interesting idea, and it's quite nice that we see how scenes play out with just changing a small event. I've rambled on enough, but I think that it is a story what you've just got to go and listen to and experience, because it has quite a lot going on within it. Obviously you have the centre character piece, which is about Vicky, but all around it you have a sort of butterfly paradox theme, and it is very much the equivalent of Vicky does the Aztecs in a way. So yeah, it's a very interesting idea, and I love it, despite it being a Doctor Light story, which I'm not too much of a fan of. But this story, because I feel like Vicky and Stephen are such strong companions on Big Finish, I really didn't mind it, because I feel like the themes what were explored within it were enough to keep me invested with going, oh, when's the Doctor going to appear? I feel like this story has a lot going on within it. So yeah, Crash of UK 210, fantastic story, Has some nice little references back to previous adventures, especially the rescue with obviously the little sand beast, what Vicky names, and obviously Bennett, and explains sort of the backstory of that, which is very interesting. So yeah, I feel like you'll probably have the most enjoyment if you're familiar with Vicky's story, but because this story really does play heavily within Vicky's, you know, overall Doctor travels. So yeah, I think that this is a wonderful story and has a beautiful ending. I've rambled on enough. I love it. So I'm going to give this story a 9.5 out of 10. It is a wonderful story. So there we have it. That is the overview for Series 5 of the Early Adventures. So at number 4 we have Entanglement. At number 3 we have An Ideal World. Number 2, Dalek Occupation of Winter. Then at number 1 we have The Crash of UK 210. So yeah, if you want to check out this series, then I do thoroughly recommend it because it's a very consistent series. And like I said, you can cherry pick this releases, but I do feel like Entanglement and Crash of UK 210 are the stories what link the most. But still, you can enjoy them, and I feel like they are great character pieces for each character within this TARDIS team. And yeah, I feel like it is a wonderful series. You know, you have 3 very traditional First Doctor stories in the form of Dalek Occupation of Winter, An Ideal World and Entanglement. Then you have a bit of a what-if story, which I really did enjoy, because I feel like the Crash of UK 210 is the reason why I listen to Big Finish, because it's a bit of an experimental story. And you know what, I'm all for experimental stories, because I really did enjoy it, because it's something different, it's something what we haven't experienced, and I really did enjoy the themes Jonathan Morris plays with within this story. And like I said, it never loses sight that it's a character piece story. So yeah, there we go. That's my video for the overview of Series 5 of the Early Adventures. Highly recommend this series, and I highly recommend the Early Adventures. If there's one thing that you can take away from this video, is give the Early Adventures a go. You know, dive in, give it a go, because it is a hidden mine of goodness, is the secret jewel on the Big Finish crown. It is a range what slips under the radar, but once you discover it, you'll be laughing, because you know you've discovered this whole wealth of Doctor Who stories what don't really get talked about that much, but they are utterly brilliant. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you on my next video, which will probably be Big Finish, because you know that's kind of what my channel does, isn't it really? So yeah, thank you very much. Definitely check out the Early Adventures Series 5, because you know it's a wonderful series and has a lot to offer. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye. That's the wrong Doctor. Yes, goodbye. Goodbye, my child. Yes. Yes, now Chesterton. Oh no, it's Stephen. Yes. Anyway, time for a cuppa. Yes, time for a cup of tea.